and welcome to Galaxy 89 Cars. If you follow my channel regularly, you'll know that I recently published 7 things I hate about my Abarth 595, the car I'm currently driving. Well, today I'm going to bring you 6 things I love about my Abarth 595. I'm sure I could probably find more if I really racked my brain, but I really tried to pick points that I both impulsively love and love a bit more if I put more thought into it. So hopefully this is quite a thoughtful list. Now, as I said in my 7 things I hate video, there are aspects to this car that I both love and hate. So some of the things will overlap, I imagine. The points that I bring up in this video may have featured in the 7 things I hate and vice versa. That's because I found that out of all the cars I've driven in the last year, 2 years, I think the Abarth probably has the least split personality out of all of them. What do I mean by that? I recently drove the new Lexus LC, and that car has 2 very distinct personalities, but it's mainly going to be a calm, relaxing GT. But if you want to wind it up, you really, really can. So this isn't like that at all. The Abarth 595, at least in my opinion, has an extremely dominant personality. It doesn't change, and it doesn't really, it's not really that flexible. So it's always quite hard, it's always quite loud, it's always quite drony. It doesn't necessarily do the daily driving thing that well, in my opinion at least. It's a car that you really need to sort of engage with. Now, the important thing to know about this video before I really get started is that everything is about context. On one hand, I may be nervous going for a meeting, I may have a 2-hour drive ahead of me, so all I really want is comfort and ease. Now, if I've got a car that's very loud and drony and has an uncomfortable seat and ride, that's not really what I want. But if I'm going out on a sunny Sunday evening in the summertime, then it's definitely what I want, because you want that poise. So everything's about context. Despite these points, I have fallen for this car. So anyway, without further ado, let's get to the 6 things I love about my Abarth 595. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is actually something I brought up in my other video, the 7 things I hate. And it's the way the car sounds, the exhaust noise. Despite the constant drone and the poor noise insulation, if you're out for sort of a sunny evening summer drive like I am right now, the car is extremely fun, and the noise makes it more fun. You can drive a Ford Fiesta ST, some people may disagree with me, or any other super mini hot hatch, and they usually don't actually sound that good. This sounds, well, I think it's maybe a bit Marmite, but in my opinion at least, I think it sounds great for this car genre that it is. It's got sort of a bassy sound in lower revs, but then as you go through the revs, it becomes quite high-pitched and quite raspy. And then if you build the exhaust pressure up, the small passive butterfly valve will actually open up, and it'll make more sort of like a reverberation sound. It's really nice and playful, and makes for, in my opinion at least, a far more enjoyable and playful driving experience. I'll demonstrate this for you here. The second part of how the car sounds is actually the turbo sound. Now, when you're driving around normally, in traffic, that sort of thing, when you're taking your foot off the clutch and the engine's sort of starting to engage, that's when you can really hear it. But I've heard it most prominently driving through multi-story car parks. So what I'll do now is I'll put a bit of footage in that will hopefully demonstrate exactly what I mean. So driving a car like this that has the exhaust that can pop and crack, and a turbo that you can really hear spool up, it creates quite an occasion. Since making my last video, I've changed 1 or 2 things on the car. So in the other video I made, I mentioned one of the things I really hate are the cheap plastics on the outside of the car. Well, I've actually changed those now. And I've got genuine, actual, proper 100% carbon fibre on the front and back. And they're not just like bits that you pop on, they're real carbon fibre pieces. So I had to go to a garage, I went to Renaissance Classic Sports Cars. I think you may remember me mentioning those earlier in the year. So I had the guys down at Renaissance Classics help me get the bits of plastic off and the bits of carbon on. And then literally the day after, I took the car down to TK Detailing Cars, and we had the new carbon bits and the entire car ceramic coated, which will leave a good layer of protection all over it. Now with the carbon bits, they're small, but I think they've made a massive difference with how the car looks. There's totally changed the aesthetic of the car. Now I feel more comfortable in saying that I absolutely love the general aesthetic of the 595. I mean, it's small, it's compact, it's got sort of like a bulldog stance to it, where the back is lifted up slightly more than the front. With the Michelin Pilot Sport 3s, that also makes it look a lot more aggressive and sporty. The Abarth lines down the side, the carbon fibre sill plates. All the little additions like this go-kart sized wheel, the wider arches with the new bumpers, this little turbo pressure bar gauge up on here. That when you change it to sport, it changes. It's just the general aesthetic of the car now, I actually think it looks really, really good. And actually, one of the most amazing things I've found about the way the car looks is it's not just me who's into it. I didn't expect anyone to be interested really driving past in the fact that I'm driving an Abarth. But people do honestly look, and I mean, just yesterday I drove past a road quite near where I live, and there were some kids screaming, "There's an Abarth, there's an Abarth." And when I took the car to Brooklands a few months ago for their spring event, people were going around the car, they were looking at it, they were asking me questions. I mean, there is a genuine following for Abarth, which I had no idea about before getting into the brand. I took my car briefly back to Renaissance yesterday to discuss a few things for the future, and I couldn't believe that one of the people who worked there was like really into the car. He couldn't wait to hear what it sounded like and have a sit in it. I mean, you expect that level of interest with a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or even a Maserati, but with a little Abarth, I sort of didn't. It's actually a really, really positive thing that people aren't like stuck up necessarily about cars they're into, that a car like this can have a huge following and even have people running around screaming in the street. I think it's great. In case you weren't aware, this car has a sport mode. Now, a lot of cars you press sport mode or something of the like and nothing really happens. But in this, it does. It makes a noticeable change. When I press sport mode, the dash changes first of all. It becomes more aggressive. MPG is changed for G meters. Checkered flags emblazoned the sides. It immediately looks more sporty. The very, very light and soft steering becomes hardened and more direct. I think it's sort of almost kind of hard to demonstrate that, but you automatically feel like you're able to position the car better. As well as that, the throttle pedal becomes more responsive. Right now it feels kind of buttery, kind of sluggish. There's also some turbo lag, which is undeniable. But when in sport mode, it's almost immediate. I mean, the jerkiness of the car increases tenfold, and you feel that there's a far more immediate response from the throttle pedal. Because the engine revs harder, it's also easier to get more pops and bangs and raspy sound out of the exhaust. So it really does change the experience totally. And it's so nice to be able to change the characteristics of the car and make it even more hardcore in the right context. Now, in my last video, I spoke about the handling and ride in a negative context. That's because I was talking about it in sort of a daily driving, everyday type context. But now if we take it into a different context, the context of wanting to go for a more spirited drive, to wanting to really explore the capabilities of the car, the hard seatbelt seats that hold you in quite well laterally, the suspension, for example, the hard ride generally, it makes for a relatively composed driving experience. It means that the car feels like you can control it well and you can point it in the right direction. In the dual point that I've chosen as handling and performance, I've covered handling, so what about performance? It's got a 4-cylinder, 1.4 litre turbo engine that kicks out around 178 brake horsepower in this model. That produces a sub 7 second 0 to 62 mile per hour or 100 km per hour time. I think that's pretty good for a car that's basically just starts its life as a Fiat 500. So the red line on my car is at 6,000 RPM. I've never gone up to that. On the motorway in 5th gear, which is the final gear, the car will hold steadily on about 3,000 revs, doing about 45-50 mpg on the central display. Motorway driving, absolutely fine, but then you get the drone, but we won't go into that. If you want to know more about that, you can watch my other video. But the car, I feel, comes into its element in sort of country road driving and city driving, where the roads aren't so wide, where everything's a lot more compact, and where you need more sort of punchy instant speed to be able to drive you forward and maybe get out of an exit in time, or move out of the way, or use the car's small size to be able to pull over and get through a lane that maybe another car can't. So you feel very able in that sense, because this car is very, very punchy. So with coming out of a roundabout, for example, it's very easy to sort of jump out ahead when maybe in a slower car or a more relaxed car you wouldn't be able to do that. The size and the performance of this car make it very, very good for London. It's small enough to be able to get through traffic and be able to park in bays that larger cars simply wouldn't be able to. The punchiness of it means I can get through traffic and drive out of corners or drive into corners faster. When you're in London and everything's so fast-paced and all you want to do is get to your destination, that sort of punchiness at the bottom end is quite reassuring. Most of the points I've brought up come together to form one point on their own. The fun exhaust, the different driving modes that are very noticeable, the very good traction, very good handling. They all come together to show that this car in the right context is extremely fun to drive. And that's my next point. On a blissful evening like it is now, when the engine, tyres and tarmac are all warmed up, it means that you can really push the car as long as it's got the right rubber on. Because the car's got good traction, you can really throw it into corners with good speed. And then while you're doing that and you're coming out of the corner and going onto the straight, it's fun to push on a bit so you can really hear the exhaust pop and crack and the raspiness really come through during acceleration. So yeah, undeniably, in the right context, the Abarth is exceptionally fun to drive. The Abarth 595 is an exceptionally easy car to drive. It has electrically assisted power steering, and so the wheel is constantly very, very light. If you put it into sport mode, it makes it a little bit harder, but generally speaking, extremely light steering. It's very manoeuvrable, and you can really place it where you want it to be. As well as having light steering, the car also has a very light clutch, and the bite point in the clutch is very easy to find. That means you have the confidence to really hook the car up from a standstill. Another great feature found in this car is hill start assist. If I'm on a gradient, for example, going up a hill and I have to stop, the car will be held by the brakes, it will automatically come on. A high-pitched sound will be emitted to alert you to the fact that the hill start assist has come on. To move away from hill start assist, you just find the clutch's bite point, take your foot off the brake, the car is held, and then you just move away. I mean, it works every single time, and I've never felt a fault in it, ever. You feel very confident in its ability to hold the car. And while the 1.4 litre 4-pot isn't the fastest thing in the world, these factors come together and they paint the illusion that this is actually an exceptionally fast car. So while you're driving it, you don't feel like you're not being entertained. You don't feel like you're not in a performance vehicle. You really, really do. It'll be intriguing to see if any other Abarth owners out there feel the same things about the car that I do. If you do, or if you don't, please leave a comment in the description of the video. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Either way, I hope this has been an insightful and informative video. If it has, please leave a like. Feel free to subscribe for my latest content, and until next time, thanks for watching.